Yeah, I'm ready for this boss fight. All right, yeah, maybe I'm just rushing it a little bit.
Many months later.
I don't want to do this anymore. You can't make me. I don't want to do this anymore. This SoulsBorne Shadows Ring Twice series. This series has killed me. I think I'm done with Dark Souls. This entire franchise was made by Hidetaki Miyazaki, aka the daddy of Dark Souls. And it turns out that this dude stole, like, a lot of stuff from Berserk. Like, look at... he stole a lot. And so I'm gonna play and rank every single Souls game, from Demon Souls to Elden Ring Nightreign, from S tier to F tier. Let's go. Demon Souls from 2009 is the precursor to all of the Dark Souls games, and this game made the formula that we now know and love. The world of Boletaria is beautiful, medieval, and gothic, and I just love it. And the first boss that you fight against is just a pure testament to how punishing the game is going to be and how much you are going to get punished for being greedy. And I'll say it, man, like, Demon Souls bosses are very gimmicky. Like, I wasn't really expecting this level of gimmick value or puzzles when it comes to the bosses as much as there were in the game. And ultimately, this led to a little bit of confusion, but overall, the bosses in general are pretty good. I mean, they're not endgame level of bosses, but at the end of the day, I have to think that this is the foundation that started the rest of the franchise. The sense of isolation you get from playing Demon Souls is very overwhelming and yet kind of peaceful. When you're not attacking enemies, when you're just exploring, you're in this like state of wonder, and it's kind of beautiful that you get to explore all of these decrepit, broken, and empty castles. Now, there is a bit of a difficulty curve with Demon Souls, because if you don't know, there are like 5 different archstones, like portals to different places that you have to go through to finish the game. And the game doesn't care which order you go into the portals, but the difficulty scaling, like, definitely does. And this is one thing that, like, I wish I knew earlier, but I guess you have to kind of explore in these kind of games to understand how far you need to go and where you can go and where you can't go. Now listen to this, like, sometimes I would go to the next archstone because it was like the next one along, and I would get absolutely pummeled in the face because for some reason I wasn't a high enough level to actually go into that area. It was really frustrating, and sometimes I just kept kind of like pushing through, but then found out that that's probably not the best thing to do and just move on. Now I will say this, I did the final boss first time. Not the little like sludge dude on the ground, no. I did False King Alant first try. That feels like it shouldn't be a thing, right? I don't know, maybe I'm just like too skilled for everyone. Because the game punishes you for doing things in order, a couple of gimmick fights, and generally the world not feeling as big as it could be, I'm going to rank this as a C tier. It's still great, but it feels like it wants to do more but can't. The game that is said to be the best of the best, the creme de la creme of the Demon Souls, Dark Souls, Bloodborne franchise, is really good. The interconnected world, the fact that there are so many different and unique places in the environment and how they're all somehow like interconnected is ridiculously cool. And man, that like filing shrine music is just like so good. Along with the game's really strong atmosphere, the sense of discovery that you have while playing Dark Souls is something that I haven't really experienced before, because there are so many different offcuts to a route that you can just go into, and most of the time, granted, you will get absolutely slaughtered, but the discovery of being slaughtered in those rooms is just as satisfying. And the bosses, like, whew! All in the Smoke is like an endurance test, because you have to kind of decide which one you want to kill first, because then that one merges with the other one and makes the final boss. It's a pretty cool mechanic. And you have Artorias in the DLC, which is, it feels like this boss wasn't made for Dark Souls 1. It feels like it was made for a later entry, but they just wanted to put it in anyway. And of course, like, no, not Pinwheel. Pinwheel wasn't great. Each of these bosses felt like a real challenge, except Pinwheel. Not you. And granted, you can over-level yourself and make these bosses, like, piss easy. But I feel like Dark Souls' progression kind of limits that a little bit. That being said, the second half of this game is not only incredibly short, but as soon as you reach Anor Londo, it feels really weak. Like, they've just put everything in the first half, and then we're like, oh crap, like, guys, Hidetaki, we've got to make, like, the second part of the game. Like, what are you doing, man? And so they just like scrambled together anything that they could and made the second half of the game. Oh, the dodging mechanics. I forgot about the dodging mechanics. You can only dodge like right, left, back, and front. I really had to think about that, how to do that. I don't know my rights from my left from my rights. Damn it. But that aside, like when you get used to it, it's fine. And so for that, I'm going to give Dark Souls an A tier. It's great. The atmosphere is great. It's just really let down by its second half. Now, I've not heard a lot of good things about Dark Souls 2, but I kind of don't understand. Personally, Dark Souls 2 was a massive vibe, man. I mean, look at Majula. It is beautiful, and to be honest, I think it's probably the most beautiful out of the lot. The world and its areas are so unique and different from one another, and that's one thing that I really loved about this game. No two areas ever felt the same. And that kind of goes for the enemy variety as well. It feels like there is a lot more variety in the enemies that you encounter rather than in Demon Souls and Dark Souls. Now, I will say I'm playing the Dark Souls 2 Scholar of the First Sin edition, and the enemy placement is, oh my god, it's so bad. One thing about this game is that it is gank central. You will get ganked on by so many enemies all the time. And the DLC is no different, right? In the DLC, there is literally a gank fight of 3 different people. One's like a heavy, one's like, I don't know, a fencer, and the other one has like a bow and arrow. So no matter what you do, they're going to get you. It was so frustrating. But the DLCs in general, pretty great. You know, I haven't got much to complain about them, to be honest. All great stuff. One thing that I really loved about this game is the bonfire aesthetics, because everyone plays the game of Dark Souls and just think, oh, you know, I really wish that I could replay that boss again because it was so good. You can with a bonfire aesthetic. Granted, it makes the area a lot more difficult, but it allows the player to get that extra bit of challenge and, you know, you can fight that boss once again. And it's a mechanic that was never ever reintroduced in the series, apparently, which just baffles my brain because it's such a good mechanic. The actual world in general is a massive open world like Dark Souls 1, but the connectivity between areas does feel a little bit confused with itself. Like, how the hell is this massive lava castle at the top of a mountain when you can see the mountain range from the bottom and it's not there? Like, it doesn't make any sense. And the hitboxes are another thing that I really disliked about Dark Souls 2. It felt like I was never really hitting anything. Or like, if I would hit an area, it shouldn't have hit, but it did. And also, when I would hit an enemy, it never felt like I was hitting them. There was never any weight behind it. I just kind of felt like I was just going, but it's just an observation. Also, when I was playing, Dark Souls 2 has a character with my name in it. Look, like, that's me. That is me. It's really cool. It's really cool that I've got a character in Dark Souls. This game wasn't made by Hidetaka Miyazaki. He was off making Bloodborne the next century. And so it kind of lost some of that polish, I feel. I'm going to put this game at a C tier. I'm going to put it as a C tier. I really don't want to do that. I really love the game itself. I really loved my time with it. But it feels like it's missing so much of that polish that I have to put it at C. This game is fucking sick, man. I love Bloodborne. It was amazing. I loved the Cthulhu influences. I loved the gothic architecture. I loved the gory feel to the game. It was something that I've been wanting my whole life and didn't experience till now. One thing that I noticed is the weapon variety is a lot lower than in other Dark Souls games. And that's because each weapon has two weapons inside of it. You know, you might have a tiny little sword, and then all of a sudden, you've got like a massive hammer attached to your back, and you just fling it out, and so good. This game feels more like Dark Souls than Dark Souls 2 does, and I think it's because the world is so tight-knit, and each area isn't a redundant place that you kind of, you know, you can go to, but, you know, you don't really have to. It's like each area feels important. And in this game, you can do everything that I've wanted to do in a Dark Souls game. You can be fast and aggressive. Like, that's the active encouragement of the game, is to play as aggressive as possible. And that's kind of helped by the bleed system, or the health system, where if you take some damage, but then you attack quickly back, then you get some of that health back. So you're actively encouraged to fight back. Now, speaking of the health system, I fucking hate it. I really hate it because unlike in Dark Souls and Dark Souls 2, the game kind of leans into that Demon Souls thing where you have limited items for health and you have to actually pick them up or buy them. You don't just get them back after you die, which could lead to some really frustrating moments when exploring the world. No, it's not a massive grind, like you can find them on the ground or you usually have enough blood echoes, but having to go back to the Hunter's Dream, which is gorgeous by the way, can be the most time-breaking thing in the game. Bloodborne has some of the best bosses in the entire series. Murgo, the Wet Nurse, the Moon Presence, German, like all of these bosses felt like they could do exactly what you could do. They aren't just limited to a couple of moves, they felt like they actually adapted a bit more to the player and to me. And the fight with German is so good because you don't actually have to fight him if you don't want to. Like, you can just choose to end the game at that point. But if you do, you're fighting for your life, and it kind of adds this extra layer to it. It's wonderful. Now, I will say, I wish this game ran a bit better. Bloodborne seems to have a problem running, right? Because the frame rate dips so much, and sometimes it can be kind of a make or break in a boss fight because you need those iframes to be able to dodge attacks. And so if anything, that was the only really frustrating part of the game, was just that bloody frame rate. Now, after all of that said, I'm going to place Bloodborne at an S tier. This game is phenomenal. Like, if you've never played a Dark Souls game or a Demon Souls game or whatever, Bloodborne's the way to go. It is so good, and it really does stand on its own 2 feet. Not saying that other ones don't, but I feel like Bloodborne was just so unique. Dark Souls 3 became like the culmination of every Dark Souls before it. And in essence, it's kind of like a best of, if you will, like a best hits. And it shows in the locations, like a return to Anor Londo, the Gwyn music playing at the end boss fight against the Soul of Cinder. At this point in the series, Dark Souls 3 was the cleanest and most polished and tight-knit Dark Souls experience. The bosses in Dark Souls 3 have that layer of challenge, but also that layer of predictability where if you just do trial and error, you will defeat the boss, and that's kind of true for the whole series, but for Dark Souls 3 it feels even worse and better at the same time because the bosses are so complex. And this is where it kind of gets a little bit difficult to praise Dark Souls 3 because the world itself is beautiful and the locations that you go to are great, but you go through it in such a linear fashion, and I really mean a linear fashion. As in, you go from one area to the next area, to the next area, to the next area, to the next area. Like, you don't branch off really at all to go to a new location. You just go in like one straight line the whole time. In each area, there is room to explore, but you can't explore off the beaten path, really. And that was something that I really missed. In that vein, it kind of feels a lot less innovative than other entries in the series, even Dark Souls 2. But I don't want to knock Dark Souls 3 because of that, because the foundations of the game are fantastic. The experience, the conclusion to the Dark Souls trilogy was so amazing, even if the game did kind of heavily rely on Dark Souls 1 fan service. And its DLC, even better. Gale, oof, Gale. And so for all of that, I'm going to rank Dark Souls 3 an A tier. It is still really a great game, but I feel like it lost that kind of sense of wonder that made Dark Souls 1 so amazing. The thing I've found with Sekiro is that mechanically it's the most amazing, but also mechanically the most different. And that's not a bad thing, like, I'm all here for innovation. Instead of going for like a medieval fantasy, they've kind of gone for like a Japanese apocalypse. And so much like Bloodborne, aesthetically, it's a breath of fresh air. Fundamentally, I think Sekiro has the best combat of the entire series, and that's just because you're not just attacking, you're having to block all of your attacks to get big damage on bosses, and that's kind of the mechanical difference in how the combat plays. And it kind of feels like a rhythm game as you're blocking all of these attacks to build up your punish meter. And so for me, going through all of these games, it was such a differentiation that it kind of took me a long time to really come to grips with. Because I just kept wanting to attack and it wasn't doing as much as when I used the punish system. And because of this, it makes boss fights so incredibly challenging, but also so incredibly rewarding at the same time, because you're not just learning attacks, you're learning to block them rather than, attack with them. Also, you have a bloody grappling hook hand where you can go up to high ledges and traverse the world a lot easier and with a lot more flexibility than you've been able to in any of the other games, essentially. oh man, that was so good. And there's much more of a focus of stealth in this game because you can hide against walls and critical kill people from the side. It kind of made the game take a slower pace, but also made you think more about combat scenarios rather than just like running in and I was like, yeah, I'll just go attack them. And instead I actually had to think about, oh, maybe how can I traverse this without getting kind of pummeled by tons and tons of enemies. And this game actually, wait for it, had a story. Yeah, it had a story. Like an actual story. Granted, it's not this massive cinematic thing, but it's got far much more, story elements than any of the other entries in the series so far. And it was a weird disconnect because as I've been going through all these games, I haven't really experienced that at all. So having these breaks from combat to actually explore the story was kind of refreshing in a way. That being said, I don't think I'd want every Dark Souls to be like that, and I don't think they need to be. It was just kind of a fun experiment for Sekiro. Now, one of the biggest things is that there's no build variety, not really. I mean, you have different arm abilities, but the sword that you have at the beginning of the game, you have it for the entire game. And so you're limited entirely to that playstyle. Which means that on repeat playthroughs, there's not that much replayability when it comes to how you play the game. I mean, yes, you can play with a prosthetic arm, but you can't choose combat and you can't approach combat in a different way. Not really, anyway. Now, I really did enjoy the combat, but I only really loved it when I got it. And I didn't feel like I really got it until like halfway into the game, because it's so drastically different to each of the other Souls games. But in general, the bosses, the level variety, I mean, you fight a dragon in like this really cool like wind space. It was so sick. But all of that said, I'm gonna place it at an F tier. No? You want it? Okay. I'm gonna place it at a B tier. Yeah. As much as I loved the game, I feel like it didn't really feel like Dark Souls. It felt like its own thing, right? And that's okay, it's not labeled as a Dark Souls, but as a Dark Soul, as a ranking of the Souls, it's like a B tier. If it was its own thing, it would probably be an A tier, but in the grand scope of things, in all of them, it's a B tier. Here we are, Elden Ring, the game that everyone and their great-grandparents have played. The world is so massive, it is so big, and there are so many different places for you to go to. There are so many different dungeons, although, the variety on how they look and how they play is, The actual world itself and the enemies that you encounter are some of the most diverse that the series has ever seen. Now, because this game is an open world and, from Dark Souls 1 and even Dark Souls 2, you're kind of left to your own devices, I really appreciated that each of these sites of graces kind of had an arrow directing me roughly where to go. And it was really helpful because otherwise I think I would have got lost and never finished the game. But let me tell you, I'm never going back to Caelid again. It's not happening. When I replay that game, I'm just going to close my eyes and kind of hope that I make my way through. I'm not experiencing Caelid again. I will say though, the bosses are great. My favorite from what I experienced was Bale. Bale was such a challenge. I hated Bale, but I was so happy when I finally beat him. And of course, like Radahn, where you can summon tons of NPCs that fight alongside you as Radahn's riding on his little tiny horse. It was amazing. And Placidax. What a great fight. The area was amazing. All of the boss fights in Elden Ring are so cinematic on a scale that the series just hasn't seen before. Now, I don't want to glaze Elden Ring that much, but its boss fights, it's got them nailed down to a T. By the time you explore the whole game, you will notice that there are a couple of reused bosses come the late game, and that's okay. A game on this scale is understandably reusing some assets and kind of palette swapping some characters like with the Erd Tree avatars and stuff like that, but it did kind of leave me with a bit of like, like another Erd Tree avatar? Really? And the endgame spikes in like difficulty at a really like weird point. Like it felt like I was doing absolutely everything fine. And then all of a sudden, like I'd go to like stab an enemy and it'd be like I was giving them like a back massage or something like that. It was very kind of difficult to understand that difficulty spike. And because of that, there's some balance issues kind of sprinkled in as well. Overall though, I loved my time with Elden Ring. It took me a long time to do it. Yeah, it did. It really did. And is by far the longest game in the series, because there is just so much to explore and so much to do. You can really do this game at your own pace. And you know, you can explore tons of different places, there are tons of different weapons to choose, and so in turn you have lots of build variety as well, as you're not limited in that respect. You can really make your Elden Ring character your own, which is beautiful. Personally, for me, I'm going to put Elden Ring as a S tier. It's good. It's good. It's by far the most accessible game in the series, especially for new players. But even for people who have played the rest of the series like myself now, I find that it's probably the most enjoyable because you have the freedom to explore worlds that you were otherwise not really able to do in prior Dark Souls games. Elden Ring Nightreign is a game that I've wanted and everyone else has wanted since like the very first Dark Souls game, a multiplayer Dark Souls. Now granted, there was multiplayer in prior Dark Souls games, but it wasn't to this scale and not with this level of intensity as well, because in prior games, if you die when in co-op, then they get sent back to their own world and you have to summon them back in. It's like a whole thing. But Nightreign pits you and your friends in a 3-day cycle, a kind of Fortnite Elden Ring, because the rings keep going in, but I feel like that's quite reductive, so maybe not Fortnite. You don't really have builds on the same scale that you did before in prior Dark Souls games. You have instead preset classes with preset abilities, and you can deviate from them if you want to, but these are kind of like a basis stat-wise to what kind of playthrough you want to have. Even progression and levels are streamlined in Nightreign because you're not leveling endurance and strength and dexterity and intelligence, you're just upgrading yourself, like just one button press, that's it. And obviously that changes with the amount of runes you have. The best way I can describe Elden Ring Nightreign, much like Dark Souls 3, is that it's a best of. There are some unique enemies, there are some unique bosses, but a lot of the bosses in Everjails and End of Day 1 and 2 are often enough just recycled bosses. And in a way, it's kind of the thing that everyone wanted. They wanted to be able to replay these bosses. There you go, guys, you got it. One thing I really did love was the shifting earth, meaning that the base game's map actually did have some variety from time to time with new areas and new bosses. So it added that needed variety because the base game's map was getting a bit stale after a while. I will say I'm so upset that I bought the DLC for this game. I'm so upset because the map itself, I hate it so much. Like, you just do a circle. I mean, you kind of do that in base Nightreign anyway, but it just feels, I don't know what it is. I hate it. I hate it so much. But the actual characters that you got with the DLC, top tier, so good. We'll play them all the time. Often enough, the final boss of each of the runs is one of the most intense experiences that you will ever have. Watching your friends down like a quarter of the health left of the boss is some of the most stressful stuff in the world. Now granted, with characters like Duchess or with Wilder, you can just use your ability to kind of res your teammates, but if they've been downed like 3 times, then it might not happen straight away, and so there's kind of that risk-reward. But by far, the endgame bosses are some of the best the series has ever seen. They are so ridiculously difficult, and sometimes it feels like even though you're a seasoned player, like I was playing this boss, and I was like, yeah, I've kind of done something similar before, but I got destroyed. You know, you should never think that you know too much about a boss in Dark Souls. You should never think that. You should always be in self-doubt the whole time. But these bosses, just like Elden Ring, are so cinematic, and some of the in-game event stuff that happens with them are some of the most beautiful things that I've ever seen when it comes to a Souls game. One of my biggest gripes with the game is the multiplayer. Like, I really hate the fact that I can't talk to the people that I'm playing with. And there's always been a theme in Dark Souls of isolation and feeling alone, but in a multiplayer game, I kind of feel like I don't want to feel alone. Please, I want friends. And so someone will ping over here, someone will ping over there, and then you'll be like, oh, which one do I go to? Okay, I'll go over there. And then you start treading along and you're going, and then all of a sudden, this dude over there, he just decides to leave the game. He just decides to leave the game because he didn't get his way. He didn't get his route. So he was like, I'm out. But even with that, it doesn't make the world scale to 2 players. It will still scale to 3 players, even though there are 2 players left. And it is the most frustrating thing in the world. It really is. And it also gets frustrating because you're doing the same routes of the game every single time. You're going to the churches, you're going to the Everjails, you're going to the castle. Like, they haven't really added that much to Elden Ring Nightreign at the moment, at this point in time, apart from one DLC, which was kind of rather useless, apart from the characters. And so in that respect, the game can get boring after a while, especially if you're playing it kind of day after day. And so with all of that said, I'm going to rank Elden Ring Nightreign a C tier.
Hey everyone, it's Ben in the editing suite. I've decided that I think I'm going to put Nightreign actually at a D tier, purely just because I find the experience is actually quite lacking in content, especially for how long the game has been out. And yeah, so I'm just gonna move it over. There we go. On with the video.
Now, it is really fun. Like, there are just some multiplayer complications that kind of make the experience feel quite frustrating, especially with player communication, people not getting their way and then leaving the game. And also, you know, because the actual map and experience that you have can get really repetitive because they haven't added much variety to the game bar one really bad DLC map. It feels like you're just playing the same thing over and over again. And, you know, you get a bit excited when you see a new shifting earth, which is cool. But that being said, like, I don't want to be reductive of Nightreign because it is a solid multiplayer experience. It's just not the best that Dark Souls as a series has to offer. But that's the whole list. I hope you did enjoy. Let me know what your lists are in the comment section below. And yeah, thanks.